Captain Sarah Mitchell stood at the head of the vast training field, the morning sun glinting off the helmets of 800 soldiers arrayed in precise formation. Her boots pressed firmly into the hard-packed dirt as she scanned the ranks. The drill was meant to be routine, a test of discipline and coordination, yet a storm was brewing, and she could feel it in every nerve. Every eye in the formation flicked toward the approaching figure, a man whose reputation alone was enough to send shivers down spines, Colonel Robert Hargrove. He walked with a rigid, commanding stride, his polished boots striking the ground like drumbeats announcing impending chaos. Mitchell had heard the whispers among the ranks for months. Hargrove was brilliant in strategy but volatile in temperament, quick to anger, and equally quick to humiliate those who dared challenge his authority. Even among officers he was feared, a man who demanded obedience and punished dissent, regardless of the rank or merit of the person involved. For Sarah Mitchell, this confrontation was inevitable. She had a track record of excellence, a decorated career built on precision, leadership, and earning the trust of her soldiers. But Hargrove never acknowledged merit. He relied on fear to maintain dominance. Today, in front of 800 soldiers, the collision of their worlds would come to a head. The air was thick with tension. Soldiers shifted slightly, their boots crunching against the gravel as they sensed the brewing conflict. Whispers ran like ripples across the formation. Some murmured about the colonel's reputation, others about Mitchell's skill and leadership. Their training had taught them to focus on commands, to suppress personal concerns during drills, but the human instinct to watch the clash between authority figures was impossible to ignore. Every soldier in that formation could feel the electricity in the air. Hargrove's eyes narrowed as he neared the front of the formation. He stopped a few feet from Mitchell, who stood motionless, her posture impeccable. A few soldiers held their breath, noticing the faint tightening of her jaw. Hargrove's voice cut through the morning air like a whip. "Captain Mitchell," he barked, his tone dripping with condescension, "it seems your leadership has room for improvement. I've reviewed your plans for today's exercise, and frankly, I expected better. This drill is beneath you, or perhaps beneath the army itself." A murmur ran through the soldiers. Some gritted their teeth, feeling anger for their captain. Others glanced nervously at the colonel, unsure how far he might take his provocation. Mitchell's lips pressed into a thin line. She had faced criticism before, often constructive, but Hargrove's words were intended to wound, to diminish her authority in front of those she commanded. Every eye on the field was on them, and every heartbeat seemed magnified in the tense silence that followed his words. Mitchell's mind raced. She knew losing her temper could escalate the situation beyond control, yet she also understood that allowing the colonel's intimidation to go unchallenged would erode the trust she had spent years building with her soldiers. Maintaining discipline in the formation was critical. If the soldiers sensed any crack in her authority, chaos could spread like wildfire. Her training kicked in, grounding her thoughts, centering her focus. Every inch of her body screamed readiness, not for confrontation, but for controlled action. Hargrove took a step closer, narrowing the space between them. The tip of his polished boot stopped just shy of the captain's line of command. "Redo the drill," he ordered, voice rising, dripping with superiority. "Clearly, you don't understand the principles of effective leadership. I'll demonstrate how it should be done." Soldiers stiffened in shock. Hargrove's audacity to override her orders in front of the formation violated every protocol they had been taught. Some glanced around, looking for someone to intervene, but instinct, fear, and military hierarchy froze them in place. Mitchell remained calm, her eyes sharp and unwavering, locked onto Hargrove. "Colonel," she said evenly, her voice carrying across the formation, "the drill is executed precisely according to standard procedure. Any adjustments will be implemented as part of the after-action review, not under threat to morale or discipline." Her words were firm, unflinching, and delivered with absolute authority. Soldiers exhaled slightly, a collective relief at her refusal to buckle, yet tension remained like a tightly coiled spring. Hargrove's scowl deepened. He raised his hand slightly, brushing it against Mitchell's shoulder, not in a professional touch but as a silent warning. "Do you think you're above the chain of command, Captain?" he hissed. The formation's whispers grew louder, some soldiers exchanging incredulous glances. The audacity of the colonel's intimidation in front of hundreds of soldiers was almost unreal. Mitchell felt the familiar surge of adrenaline, the body's preparation for conflict. Years of training, discipline, and self-defense knowledge now coiled within her, ready to respond if necessary. Time seemed to stretch. Soldiers held their positions, some shifting uneasily, sensing the potential for violence. Mitchell assessed the distance, the number of witnesses, and Hargrove's rising anger. One misstep could escalate the confrontation into a spectacle of chaos, undermining her authority and potentially the cohesion of the entire battalion. But retreat was not an option. Every soldier's eyes remained fixed on her, waiting to see whether courage or fear would prevail. The silent battlefield of wills had begun, and the first move could change the dynamic for the entire base. Hargrove's chest heaved with controlled fury. "I won't tolerate insubordination," he growled, stepping closer. Mitchell's heartbeat accelerated, not from fear but from anticipation. She knew instinctively that the moment required precision, swift, decisive action balanced with composure. The formation was silent except for the faint rustle of helmets and uniforms in the morning breeze. Soldiers were watching, frozen by the tension, sensing the gravity of what could unfold before them. This wasn't merely about a drill. It was about respect, authority, and courage, tested in the rawest way imaginable. Mitchell's mind cleared. She had the skills, the knowledge, and the courage. The storm had arrived. The formation remained silent, every soldier rigid with anticipation, as Colonel Robert Hargrove's shadow fell over Captain Sarah Mitchell. The morning sun glinted off his polished insignia, symbols of rank and authority that seemed to mock her very presence. Yet Mitchell stood unmoved, shoulders squared, jaw set, eyes fixed on the colonel. She could feel the simmering anger radiating from him like heat from a furnace. Every movement he made carried weight, and every step closer heightened the tension. Soldiers whispered nervously, their instincts screaming that the moment might erupt into something dangerous. Hargrove's voice cut through the crisp air like a whip. "Redo the drill," he barked, stepping so close that Mitchell could feel the faint brush of his hand against her arm. "Clearly, you're not fit to lead today. Perhaps you've forgotten what discipline and strategy really look like." His words were sharp, cruelly deliberate, aimed to wound her pride and undermine her authority in front of the soldiers she commanded. The murmurs spread quickly through the ranks, reaching the ears of junior officers and enlisted alike. They shifted uneasily, glancing at each other, uncertain how far the colonel would go. Mitchell's eyes narrowed slightly, but her voice remained steady. "Colonel, the drill is executed according to protocol. Any adjustments should be made during the after-action review, not through intimidation in front of the battalion." Her tone was firm, unyielding, carrying the weight of someone who refused to be bullied. She could feel the soldiers' gazes, hundreds of them fixed on her, waiting to see if she would falter. The silent communication between leader and troops was powerful. Their respect hinged on her ability to maintain composure. Hargrove's nostrils flared, his temper rising. He stepped even closer, a deliberate violation of personal space. Soldiers instinctively recoiled, a few taking subtle steps back. Whispers turned to murmurs of disbelief. Many had trained under Mitchell for years, and they knew she had skill, but seeing a colonel, someone of his stature, attempting to intimidate her physically was unprecedented. "Do you think your authority surpasses mine?" he hissed, brushing his hand across her shoulder in an unmistakable threat. His eyes burned with fury, daring her to respond. Mitchell's mind raced, assessing the situation. Every muscle in her body was alert, every sense heightened. She knew the soldiers were watching, that every decision she made would define her authority. A wrong move could escalate into chaos, potentially undermining months of discipline and cohesion. Yet retreat was not an option. Not now, not ever. Her years of training and experience taught her that courage, when combined with strategy, could neutralize even the most volatile threat. She could see Hargrove's hand twitch, a subtle prelude to aggression, and she knew she had mere seconds to act if he crossed the line. Hargrove's words became louder, venomous, attempting to humiliate her further. "I've seen better execution from recruits who have been here half as long as you. Perhaps you're not ready to command." Soldiers stiffened. Some exchanged glances, some whispered prayers, while others clenched their fists, unsure whether to intervene or remain frozen in place. Mitchell inhaled slowly, controlling her heartbeat, letting her mind map the next few seconds with precision. She understood that her response needed to be immediate, precise, and controlled. Any hesitation could cost her credibility, or worse. Time seemed to stretch. The soldier's eyes widened, senses heightened. Even the wind seemed to pause as if the entire base were holding its breath. Hargrove stepped closer again, his chest rising and falling with anger. His fingers curled slightly, a subtle warning that he was capable of violence. Mitchell assessed the distance, nodding the soldiers around her, the ground beneath her boots, the exact moment to neutralize the threat without causing injury to herself or creating chaos among the formation. She knew the rules, the procedures, the self-defense techniques she had mastered over years. "Captain Mitchell," Hargrove snapped, his voice dripping with disdain, "you will do as I say, now, or I will ensure everyone here sees exactly how incapable you are." The words struck like lightning across the formation. The soldiers gasped collectively, some instinctively stepping back, others gripping the edges of their uniforms as if bracing for the inevitable conflict. The tension was palpable, a living thing that coiled around every soldier, every officer, and every observer. Mitchell's gaze hardened, her resolve crystallizing. She understood the stakes: maintain composure, protect herself, protect the integrity of the formation, and demonstrate leadership under fire. She did not flinch, did not raise her voice, did not allow the fear creeping through the formation to touch her. Instead, she positioned herself, subtly shifting her stance, grounding her balance, preparing for the inevitable escalation. Hargrove's hand hovered near her shoulder again, more threatening this time, and Mitchell knew the moment to act was imminent. The soldiers' whispers grew into stunned silence. All eyes were on Mitchell, their respect, fear, and anticipation mingling in the charged air. A few junior officers glanced at each other, uncertain whether to intervene, but the unspoken understanding was clear. This was Mitchell's moment, and whatever happened next would define leadership for every soldier present. She could feel the weight of responsibility, not just for herself, but for the morale, discipline, and trust of 800 soldiers, all watching the impending clash of authority. Hargrove's eyes burned with fury. "I will not be disrespected," he bellowed, taking a step that closed the final inch between them. Mitchell's mind and body were in perfect alignment. Years of training, discipline, and instinct converged. The storm had reached its peak. The tension crackled like lightning above the formation. Soldiers tensed, hearts racing. The entire battalion was suspended in a moment between fear and awe, waiting to witness whether authority would be upheld or shattered. Mitchell inhaled, steadying herself, preparing to respond. The first move in this battle of wills would determine everything: the chain of command, the cohesion of the battalion, and the respect of every soldier present. The storm had fully arrived, and nothing would be the same after this morning. The tension in the formation was nearly unbearable. Every soldier stood frozen, the morning sun glinting off their helmets as if reflecting the storm brewing at the center of the field. Colonel Robert Hargrove loomed over Captain Sarah Mitchell, his face red with anger, his fists clenched at his sides. The murmurs of soldiers had died to a stunned silence. For many, it was the first time they had seen such raw confrontation, an officer of Hargrove's rank seemingly ready to strike another. All eyes were on Mitchell, the captain who had earned their respect, now standing alone against a man renowned for his explosive temper. Hargrove's voice cracked like a whip. "I will not be disrespected. Do you understand me?" His hand darted out and grabbed Mitchell's shoulder, a swift, intimidating gesture meant to unbalance her. The soldiers inhaled sharply, instinctively recoiling. Mitchell's eyes narrowed, her jaw tightening, but she did not flinch. Years of experience had taught her that the first instinct in these situations was critical. Hesitation could spell disaster, but decisive, controlled action could neutralize the threat completely. Her mind raced, analyzing every detail: the colonel's posture, the soldiers' positions, the uneven ground beneath her boots, and the small spaces available to maneuver. Hargrove's movements were deliberate yet volatile. A single wrong step could escalate the situation into chaos. Mitchell knew she had mere seconds to act. Her heart pounded, adrenaline surging, every muscle coiled and ready, yet her face remained calm. She projected authority, not fear, a crucial signal to the soldiers who depended on her leadership. The colonel's hand tightened against her shoulder. "Do you think your authority surpasses mine?" he growled. Soldiers glanced at one another, some gripping the edges of their uniforms, some stiffened in disbelief. A few junior officers muttered under their breaths, urging restraint, but instinct kept them frozen. They had all been trained to respect hierarchy, and no one expected to witness a captain defy a colonel in such a direct, tense moment. Yet there she was, unmoving, eyes locked on Hargrove, emanating unwavering composure. Hargrove raised his other hand, fingers curling like claws, his intent unmistakable. His body language screamed threat, his aura filled with years of pent-up aggression. The entire battalion seemed to hold its breath. Mitchell's mind mapped the sequence. If he struck, if he lost control completely, the soldiers would either panic or intervene improperly, risking injury and chaos. She needed to act with precision. This was no longer about a drill. It was about survival, leadership, and control under pressure. Mitchell subtly shifted her stance, grounding herself, adjusting her center of gravity, ready to respond. Every muscle in her body was alert, every sense heightened. She knew that physical confrontation might be unavoidable. Her training had prepared her for moments like this, not just in drills, but in real-life scenarios where timing, technique, and decisiveness determined the outcome. The formation watched in tense anticipation, every soldier silently willing her to act correctly. Hargrove's hand jerked toward her shoulder again, a sharper, more aggressive movement meant to intimidate or provoke. "I've had enough of your defiance," he yelled. His voice carried over the field, cutting through the silence with raw power. Soldiers tensed, some leaning instinctively forward, others shifting slightly backward. The chain of command had fractured in this moment. The rules of engagement seemed to hang in the balance. All around, murmurs spread like wildfire. This was unprecedented. A colonel about to strike a captain, in front of hundreds of soldiers. Mitchell assessed every possibility. She could not allow the colonel's aggression to escalate further. If he struck, she needed to neutralize him instantly, safely, and decisively. Her self-defense training, honed over years, gave her a clear course of action. It had been drilled into her repeatedly that the first move must be precise, controlled, and irreversible without excessive force. She positioned her feet, coiling her body like a spring ready to release, calculating the exact angle and leverage needed. Hargrove, sensing resistance, tried to force her back. He shoved lightly, enough to unbalance most people, but Mitchell held her ground, absorbing the pressure while preparing to strike back, not with aggression but with technique. Soldiers murmured in disbelief at her calm under direct threat. The tension in the air was palpable, charged with both fear and awe. Some soldiers whispered prayers, others clenched fists, all watching, all waiting, all silently holding their breath. "Captain Mitchell," Hargrove barked again, his voice trembling with fury. "You will obey me now or face the consequences." The threat hung in the air, dangerous and palpable. Mitchell's eyes never wavered. She weighed the second of hesitation against the precision of action, and the moment crystallized. She could not back down. The soldiers depended on her to maintain order, discipline, and authority. This was not just a personal confrontation, it was leadership under fire. In that suspended moment, the formation seemed to fade around her. All she could see was Hargrove's threatening posture, his raised hand, and the instinctive need to defend herself. Every second felt elongated, every heartbeat amplified. The storm had reached its peak. Mitchell's mind and body were perfectly aligned. Her breath steady, her core tight, her muscles coiled. She knew that the next instant would decide everything: the integrity of the formation, the respect of the soldiers, and the demonstration of authority that could never be taken away. Then, with lightning precision, she prepared to act. The air around the formation seemed to vibrate with anticipation. Every soldier's gaze was locked on the two officers at the center of the field. Colonel Robert Hargrove's hand hovered threateningly above Captain Sarah Mitchell's shoulder, his eyes blazing with fury and disbelief at her defiance. Mitchell's mind was laser-focused. Adrenaline surged through her veins, sharpening every sense. She felt the weight of 800 soldiers silently urging her to act, but she also understood the gravity of the moment. One wrong move could escalate into disaster, yet hesitation could cost her authority and credibility. Hargrove lunged suddenly, attempting a shove toward Mitchell's chest to assert dominance. The move was swift but predictable, an aggressive display of intimidation designed to overpower her. Years of self-defense training kicked in instinctively. Mitchell pivoted slightly, shifting her weight to absorb the shove while keeping her balance. Her hands moved with precise coordination, aligning with a maneuver she had practiced countless times. Every motion was calculated, every step measured. This was not aggression. It was controlled action, designed to neutralize the threat without excessive harm. The colonel's momentum worked against him. As he extended his hand, Mitchell seized the opportunity. With a sudden, fluid motion, she grabbed his wrist and twisted his arm behind his back in a practiced joint-lock maneuver. A sharp, audible crack echoed across the field, and Hargrove let out a yell of pain and surprise. Soldiers gasped collectively, some stepping back instinctively, others frozen in awe. The unthinkable had occurred. A colonel, revered and feared for decades, was now physically subdued by a captain. The power dynamic had shifted in an instant. Mitchell maintained her stance, grounding herself firmly, keeping Hargrove's arm locked at an angle that prevented further aggression without causing permanent injury. Her voice rang out, authoritative and commanding, cutting through the stunned silence. "Hold your positions. Stay in formation." Soldiers obeyed instinctively. The battalion had been trained to respond to commands, and now, under extraordinary circumstances, they adhered to her authority without hesitation. Murmurs of shock rippled through the ranks, but discipline prevailed. Hargrove struggled, his face twisted in anger and humiliation. He had underestimated Mitchell's skill, her composure, and her courage. For a moment he attempted to resist, but the technique was perfectly executed. The joint lock held firm, denying him leverage. Mitchell's eyes never wavered from his, sending a silent message. Any further aggression would be met with equal precision. The soldiers watched in disbelief as the scene unfolded, their respect for Mitchell growing with every second. This was leadership in its purest form: courage under fire, discipline in chaos, and authority earned through skill. Around them, the battalion held their collective breath. Soldiers shifted slightly, their disbelief mingling with admiration. Some whispered to each other, words like incredible and unbelievable barely audible over the stillness. Junior officers glanced at one another, silently acknowledging that they had never witnessed such a display of control. The field, once alive with the morning's routine energy, had transformed into a theater of tension, a living lesson in courage and leadership. Every movement of Mitchell's conveyed precision, calm, and calculated authority. Mitchell subtly adjusted her grip, ensuring Hargrove could not regain control without escalating the situation. Her mind remained clear, analyzing each potential response from him. Every twist, every small shift in stance, was calculated to maintain control while protecting both herself and the integrity of the formation. Hargrove's pride had been shattered, and the humiliation was evident in the flush of his face and the narrowing of his eyes. He was a man used to dominance, yet now he was powerless, exposed in front of hundreds of soldiers. Her voice cut through the charged air once again. "Colonel Hargrove, this is your final warning. Release your aggression and comply with proper conduct immediately." The words were firm, unwavering, and imbued with authority that transcended rank. Soldiers absorbed her calm, her courage, and her clarity. Even in the midst of crisis, she remained composed, embodying the principles of leadership she had taught countless times in drills and exercises. The lesson was unfolding in real time before every pair of eyes present. A few soldiers subtly shifted, ready to support if the situation escalated, yet none interfered, recognizing that Mitchell's control was absolute. The colonel's struggle slowed. The fight in him waned as he realized he had been bested by technique and composure. Mitchell maintained her hold just enough to ensure compliance while projecting a calm authority that resonated across the entire formation. Every soldier, enlisted and officer alike, witnessed the tangible demonstration of leadership under extreme duress. Finally, Hargrove ceased his resistance, his shoulders slumping slightly, the fire in his eyes dimmed to simmering fury. Mitchell released the joint lock carefully, stepping back while keeping a safe distance. Her posture remained impeccable, her expression controlled. Soldiers exhaled collectively, the tension slowly dissipating but leaving behind awe and respect. Whispers of disbelief rippled through the ranks, evolving into murmurs of admiration. Mitchell had not only defended herself, but had demonstrated the absolute power of discipline, skill, and courage. The formation began to stabilize, soldiers returning to their positions under her continued guidance. "Positions! Resume drills in an orderly fashion," she commanded, her voice authoritative yet calm. The sound of boots adjusting, the slight shuffle of uniforms, and the return of discipline brought the morning back under control. Mitchell's gaze swept the battalion, nodding the soldiers, wide-eyed expressions and subtle nods of respect. Leadership had been tested and proven. Hargrove's threat had been neutralized, and the lesson for the soldiers was indelible. True authority is earned, not demanded. Mitchell allowed herself a small, internal exhale. The storm had passed, but the impact of the moment would linger. Soldiers would carry the memory of what they had witnessed, the courage, the precision, and the leadership displayed under direct threat. She knew that the ripple effects would reach beyond this formation, into the culture of the battalion, and perhaps even the broader military command. Today, she had proven that composure, courage, and skill could confront intimidation and win, not through fear, but through mastery and principle. The formation remained frozen for several long, tension-soaked seconds after Captain Sarah Mitchell released her hold on Colonel Hargrove. The sharp crack of the joint lock, followed by the colonel's startled cry, still echoed in the minds of the soldiers. Some blinked rapidly, as if trying to convince themselves they hadn't seen what just happened. Hargrove, the embodiment of intimidation and authority, had been subdued, physically restrained by a captain, right in front of all 800 soldiers. The sheer impossibility of the scene hung over the battalion like a storm cloud. Whispers began to ripple through the formation. "Did she just?" one soldier murmured. Another shook his head, eyes wide. A corporal muttered, "I can't believe what I just saw." The collective astonishment was palpable. Some soldiers leaned forward subtly, straining to observe details they had thought impossible. The senior officers standing at the edges of the formation exchanged tense glances, silently acknowledging that Mitchell had acted with both precision and restraint. The lesson unfolding before them was unprecedented in scope and intensity. Mitchell's voice cut through the murmurs like steel. "Hold your position, maintain your formation, respect the chain of command." The authority in her tone demanded attention, not just obedience. Soldiers, still reeling, moved quickly to comply. Boots clicked against gravel, uniforms rustled, and a low hum of compliance spread across the ranks. The shock had not paralyzed the battalion entirely. Discipline, drilled into them for years, reasserted itself. And yet, beneath the order, awe lingered. Everyone had just witnessed the embodiment of leadership in a moment of extreme crisis. Hargrove struggled weakly, his pride wounded more than his arm. His eyes darted angrily at Mitchell, but the fire had dimmed. He was no longer the dominant force. His attempt at intimidation had been entirely neutralized. Soldiers noticed the change instantly. The shift in power was unmistakable. Where once Hargrove's mere presence invoked fear, now Mitchell's calm composure inspired respect and admiration. The young recruits, who had never before seen such raw authority, looked at her in disbelief, trying to internalize the meaning of what they had just witnessed. For Mitchell, the moment was not about humiliation, it was about leadership. She continued to sweep the formation with her gaze, silently asserting control. Her posture remained impeccable, her expression calm but unyielding. She understood that the soldiers' perception of her in this instant would be long-lasting. Leadership, they realized, was not about rank alone. It was about courage, composure, and the ability to act decisively when confronted with threat. Today, she had exemplified all three in front of an entire battalion. Some of the junior officers moved subtly to shield themselves from the spectacle, yet none dared intervene. They knew that Mitchell's handling of the situation was precise and effective. A single misstep could have led to chaos, but she had managed the confrontation flawlessly, demonstrating both tactical skill and composure under pressure. The soldiers' respect for her deepened instantly. Whispers of admiration began spreading quietly, a contrast to the shock that had initially rippled through the formation. Hargrove's face was flushed with anger and humiliation. He attempted a weak protest, gesturing toward her with his good arm, but Mitchell's calm authority rendered him ineffective. "Colonel, your aggression is unacceptable," she said firmly. "You are expected to adhere to professional standards at all times, especially in front of your soldiers. This ends now." The commanding tone left no room for dispute. Soldiers absorbed every word, the significance of the moment sinking in. Mitchell had not only defended herself, but had reinforced the principles of respect, discipline, and proper conduct. The battalion collectively exhaled, the tension slowly dissipating. Soldiers adjusted their stances, returning to attention, yet the energy in the field had irrevocably shifted. Some quietly nodded in respect, while others exchanged glances, silently marveling at Mitchell's skill and composure. The story of this confrontation, though incomplete in their minds, was already becoming legendary among the ranks. Even veterans, who had seen countless displays of authority, could not recall an incident where a subordinate had neutralized a superior with such precision and calm. Mitchell's eyes scanned the formation again, noting the wide-eyed expressions, the silent nods, and the subtle murmurs of approval. She understood that the battalion had learned more than a lesson in self-defense. They had witnessed leadership at its most authentic and powerful. Fear had been replaced with respect, intimidation neutralized by skill, and authority demonstrated through courage rather than rank. The soldiers were processing it slowly, realizing the significance of what had just unfolded in front of them. Meanwhile, Hargrove struggled to regain his composure. His hand rested limply at his side, his pride clearly wounded, and his eyes darted nervously at Mitchell. Soldiers watched in astonishment, noting the complete reversal of power. What had been a threat now seemed almost theatrical, a demonstration of how discipline and courage could overturn fear. Mitchell maintained her stance, her voice calm but commanding, as she reiterated the need for order and proper conduct. Formation, attention. We will continue drills, but professionalism will not be compromised. As the soldiers shifted into their positions for the resumed exercise, whispers of admiration transformed into quiet acknowledgement. "She's incredible," one veteran murmured. "I've never seen anything like that in my career," said another. Junior officers nodded, silently acknowledging that they were witnessing a living lesson in leadership that would remain with them for years. Mitchell, standing tall in the center of the field, had not only survived a confrontation with one of the most feared officers in the battalion, but had transformed the fear in the soldiers' minds into respect and loyalty. For the first time that morning, the formation began to move with measured purpose. Boots struck the ground in rhythm, voices echoed commands, and soldiers adjusted their uniforms, their movements synchronized. Yet beneath the ordinary motions of the drill, the battalion carried an undercurrent of awe. They had seen courage in action, composure under extreme pressure, and a demonstration of authority that transcended rank. Mitchell's example had left an indelible mark. The lesson would endure far beyond this day, shaping the soldiers' understanding of true leadership. The field was alive with an almost electric tension as the soldiers adjusted to the reality of what had just occurred. Captain Sarah Mitchell stood at the center of the formation, shoulders squared, eyes scanning the ranks with unwavering composure. Colonel Robert Hargrove, once the symbol of intimidation and authority, now stood off to the side, his pride visibly wounded and his movements uncertain. The transformation in the energy of the battalion was palpable. Soldiers who had initially frozen in disbelief now whispered among themselves, exchanging glances that carried equal parts astonishment and admiration. Even as Mitchell maintained her calm, a few senior officers moved quickly to the edges of the formation, phones in hand, calling the higher command to report the incident. Within minutes, a small group of generals and senior officers arrived, their faces a mixture of concern and curiosity. The gravity of the situation demanded immediate attention. Hundreds of soldiers were still in formation, quietly murmuring to one another, their respect for Mitchell growing with every passing second. It was clear, this confrontation would be remembered long after the morning drills had ended. Mitchell faced the officers with steady composure. She recounted the incident in meticulous detail, her tone calm yet authoritative. "Colonel Hargrove attempted to physically intimidate me in front of the formation," she said. "I responded with a controlled defensive maneuver to neutralize the threat while maintaining order and discipline among the soldiers." Every word was deliberate, chosen to convey professionalism, restraint, and adherence to military protocol. The higher command listened intently, exchanging occasional glances as they processed the severity of the confrontation. Hargrove attempted to interject, his voice quivering with both anger and embarrassment. "Captain Mitchell is exaggerating," he began, but several witnesses immediately contradicted him. Soldiers who had been closest to the altercation stepped forward, recounting the precise sequence of events. Their voices were steady, unwavering, lending credibility to Mitchell's account. The higher-ranking officers nodded, taking notes, their faces revealing that Hargrove's aggression had been undeniable. The contrast between Mitchell's controlled composure and Hargrove's flustered defiance was impossible to ignore. The soldiers remained in formation, their attention divided between the ongoing investigation and their continued duty. Yet their whispers of awe and admiration for Mitchell grew louder. "She handled it perfectly," one veteran muttered. "I've never seen anyone respond like that," another added. Even junior officers, initially unsure of how to react during the confrontation, now nodded quietly to themselves, acknowledging the lesson they had just witnessed. It was a moment that transcended the personal conflict. It was a tangible demonstration of leadership, courage, and discipline in the most extreme circumstances. Mitchell understood the stakes. One misstep during the investigation could have undermined her authority or cast doubt on her actions. Yet she remained calm, confident that her preparation, professionalism, and integrity would carry the day. She answered every question with precision, maintaining an unwavering gaze on the higher command while ensuring that the soldiers remained disciplined and attentive. The lesson being imparted was subtle but powerful. Courage and composure, when paired with skill and discipline, could override intimidation and fear. Hargrove, for his part, struggled to regain his composure. The humiliation of being subdued by a captain in front of hundreds of soldiers weighed heavily on him. His hand, still tender from the controlled joint lock, twitched involuntarily. The higher command noted the physical evidence, as well as the witnesses' accounts. Their expressions were a mix of disapproval toward the colonel and appreciation for Mitchell's professionalism. Orders were quietly discussed among them, indicating that Hargrove's actions would carry consequences. Meanwhile, the soldiers began to process the events on a deeper level. The initial shock had given way to admiration, and now a sense of pride started to emerge. They had seen a captain confront intimidation head-on, protect herself, and maintain the integrity of the formation. Conversations spread quietly, phrases like unbelievable, controlled, and courageous exchanged in hushed tones. The lesson extended beyond the immediate confrontation. It was about trust in leadership, discipline under pressure, and the demonstration of authority through action rather than fear. Mitchell's presence was magnetic. Soldiers observed the confidence and calm she maintained even amidst chaos. Her example reinforced the principles she had been teaching for years. Leadership is not about rank or intimidation, but about integrity, preparation, and the ability to act decisively when tested. She walked the line of the formation, subtly checking that soldiers had returned to proper posture, all while maintaining awareness of the higher command officers observing from nearby. Every movement conveyed authority and composure. After a brief but thorough assessment, the higher-ranking officers concluded that Mitchell had acted appropriately. They commended her for restraint, professionalism, and her ability to neutralize the threat without unnecessary escalation. Hargrove, in contrast, was noted for his aggression and violation of military protocol. His actions were recorded formally, and it became clear that disciplinary measures and reassignment were imminent. Soldiers quietly absorbed the significance of the decision, understanding that justice and proper conduct had been upheld. By the time the formation was dismissed, the energy on the field had shifted irrevocably. Soldiers who had once looked to Hargrove with apprehension now regarded Mitchell with newfound respect. Junior officers and recruits whispered her name with awe, while veterans nodded in quiet approval. The story of what had transpired would ripple through the battalion for years to come. Mitchell's leadership had been tested under extreme conditions, and she had emerged not only unscathed, but elevated in the esteem of every soldier present. As the soldiers filed out of formation, Mitchell took a moment to reflect. The morning's events had been intense, fraught with danger and potential chaos. Yet the outcome reinforced everything she believed about leadership. Courage, discipline, composure, and skill were far more powerful than rank or intimidation. She knew that the battalion would remember this day, and that her example would inspire countless soldiers to embody the same principles she had demonstrated so vividly. The tension on the base lingered even after Colonel Hargrove had been escorted to a temporary office for review. Soldiers quietly returned to their duties, but their minds remained captivated by the morning's events. Whispers of admiration for Captain Sarah Mitchell traveled through the ranks like wildfire, blending with disbelief and awe. Even seasoned veterans who had long served under strict hierarchies found themselves incredulous at the precision, courage, and composure she had displayed. Mitchell, for her part, maintained her professionalism, ensuring the battalion's operations continued smoothly while higher command reviewed the incident. Within hours, the higher-ranking officers convened a formal investigation into Hargrove's conduct. Statements were taken from numerous witnesses, including senior and junior officers, non-commissioned officers, and enlisted personnel. Each account confirmed Mitchell's story. Hargrove had attempted to intimidate and physically threaten her in front of 800 soldiers, and she had responded with calculated self-defense, maintaining discipline and authority throughout. The evidence was irrefutable. The chain of events had been observed by hundreds, leaving little room for dispute. Mitchell was summoned to meet with the commanding generals. Her posture remained impeccable, her calm authority radiating as she recounted her actions in meticulous detail. Every motion, word, and decision was explained with clarity and precision. She emphasized not only the self-defense aspect, but also the importance of maintaining order, discipline, and respect within the formation. The generals listened intently, occasionally nodding in approval, recognizing the rare combination of courage, tactical skill, and leadership she had demonstrated under extreme pressure. Meanwhile, word of the confrontation had spread quickly throughout the base. Soldiers who had been on the field that morning shared their perspectives with others who had missed the initial incident. The story evolved into a symbol of integrity, bravery, and leadership. Enlisted personnel discussed the events in hushed tones during meals and breaks, while junior officers reflected on how authority could be upheld without aggression. Even those who had once doubted Mitchell's experience or ability were forced to reevaluate their assumptions. Her actions had set a precedent, illustrating that rank alone did not guarantee respect. After a thorough review, the higher command reached a decision. Hargrove was formally reprimanded and reassigned to a desk position, stripped of direct command responsibilities for the foreseeable future. His reputation as an intimidating figure was diminished, replaced by the cautionary tale of his failed attempt to dominate a subordinate with skill and courage. Soldiers exchanged glances as the news spread, some chuckling quietly at the irony, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Mitchell, however, remained focused, aware that leadership was about more than vindication. It was about ensuring the battalion's cohesion and morale remained intact. In the days following the incident, Mitchell addressed the battalion formally. Standing tall before her soldiers, she spoke with clarity and authority. "Respect is earned through courage, integrity, and competence," she began, her voice carrying across the formation. "Authority is not measured by rank alone. Leadership is proven in moments of pressure, when the decisions we make define the trust and confidence of those we command. Today, we have witnessed the importance of discipline and composure under stress. Let this serve as a reminder. Courage and professionalism are the foundations of our mission." The soldiers listened, rapt, their previous awe now transformed into profound respect. Veterans nodded approvingly, while younger soldiers scribbled notes in their minds, absorbing the lesson as both tactical and philosophical guidance. Mitchell's words resonated deeply, reinforcing the importance of integrity, skill, and composure. The story of the confrontation would be recounted for years, becoming a cornerstone example of leadership tested under pressure and emerging with authority reinforced, not diminished. Hargrove's reassignment became widely known across the base. Soldiers reacted with a mixture of satisfaction and relief, understanding that the threat to morale and discipline had been neutralized. Mitchell's actions were quietly celebrated in mess halls, training rooms, and barracks. Her leadership was no longer theoretical or earned solely through experience. It had been demonstrated, witnessed, and verified under extreme circumstances. Respect for her soared, cementing her status as a leader who could inspire confidence, maintain discipline, and act decisively when the stakes were highest. For Mitchell, the vindication was less about personal triumph and more about the affirmation of values she had long championed. She continued to oversee drills, operations, and training, her presence commanding attention and respect. Soldiers moved with renewed confidence, knowing their captain had not only confronted a dangerous challenge but had done so with skill, precision, and composure. The battalion's morale improved visibly, and cohesion strengthened as officers and enlisted alike recognized that leadership, when embodied with integrity, could transform fear into loyalty and admiration. In the weeks that followed, Mitchell became a symbol of courage and professionalism throughout the base. Her story was recounted in training sessions, leadership seminars, and informal conversations alike. Soldiers marveled at the calm precision with which she had neutralized Hargrove's aggression, preserving order and teaching an invaluable lesson in authority. Even those initially skeptical of her ability to confront a superior officer acknowledged that she had demonstrated qualities beyond rank: bravery, discipline, composure, and tactical expertise. By the end of the month, the battalion had absorbed the lasting impact of her actions. Mitchell's leadership was no longer merely respected, it was revered. Soldiers followed her commands with unwavering confidence, inspired not only by her skills but by the courage she had shown in the face of direct threat. The lesson extended beyond individual confrontation. It became a defining example of the principles that would guide the battalion for years to come: integrity, courage, skill, and the quiet power of leadership earned, not demanded. Weeks passed after the confrontation, yet the memory of that morning remained vivid in the minds of every soldier who had witnessed it. Captain Sarah Mitchell moved through the battalion with her usual composure, yet there was a subtle shift in how soldiers responded to her presence. Junior officers straightened instinctively, recruits followed her example without hesitation, and even seasoned veterans nodded with quiet respect. Her actions had transcended the immediate event. They had become a living lesson in courage, discipline, and leadership that would endure long after the echoes of the confrontation faded. Training exercises that had once seemed routine now carried an added weight of purpose. Soldiers approached drills with renewed focus, inspired by the display of composure and authority they had observed. Mitchell emphasized that leadership was not simply about issuing orders. It was about earning respect through integrity, skill, and courage. In every briefing, every drill, every interaction, she subtly reinforced the lessons from that fateful morning. Soldiers listened intently, their eyes reflecting the understanding that true authority was rooted in principle, not intimidation. Even as the battalion carried on with daily operations, the legend of Mitchell's confrontation with Colonel Hargrove spread beyond the base. Officers from neighboring units, senior officials in the chain of command, and training instructors cited her actions as exemplary. Her precise, controlled response under extreme pressure became a model for leadership seminars and tactical courses. Soldiers recounted the story with reverence, noting the way she had neutralized a superior officer without compromising discipline or morale. The story became both a cautionary tale against unchecked aggression and an inspiring example of courage in the face of threat. For Mitchell herself, the experience left a profound impact. She reflected often on the balance between authority and discipline, the responsibilities of leadership, and the weight of example. Every decision she made afterward was informed by the understanding that soldiers not only observe actions, they internalize them. Her calm, precise, and fearless response had not only protected her personal integrity, but had also fortified the trust between her and the battalion. The foundation of respect, once solid, was now unshakable. Hargrove, meanwhile, was reassigned permanently to administrative duties far from direct command. The consequences of his aggression were widely known, and soldiers who had previously feared him now viewed him as a cautionary figure. While he retained his rank, his influence was effectively diminished. The contrast between his failed attempt at dominance and Mitchell's skilled, composed response became a frequent topic of discussion among the troops. Soldiers analyzed every detail of her actions, learning how training, courage, and strategy could override intimidation, even from a superior officer. Over time, Mitchell's influence extended beyond the battalion itself. Other units requested her guidance, seeking her insight into leadership, discipline, and tactical preparedness. Training programs incorporated case studies of the incident, highlighting the critical balance between composure and decisive action. Soldiers who had been present that day shared their experiences with peers and instructors, ensuring that the lessons would endure through multiple generations of service members. Mitchell's reputation as a leader of exceptional skill, integrity, and courage became firmly established. Yet beyond accolades and recognition, Mitchell remained focused on the battalion. She worked tirelessly to ensure every soldier understood the principles she had demonstrated: respect, discipline, and courage under pressure. She emphasized that leadership was not about fear or rank, but about serving as an example that others could follow. Through her daily presence, guidance, and mentorship, she reinforced the lessons from that critical morning, embedding them into the culture of the battalion. Soldiers gradually internalized not just her actions, but her philosophy of leadership. Years later, soldiers would recount the story of that morning as a defining moment in their careers. Recruits who joined long after the incident were told the story in detail, learning the significance of courage, discipline, and composure in leadership. The battalion carried forward a culture shaped by Mitchell's example, one in which respect was earned through integrity and skill rather than fear or intimidation. She had demonstrated that a leader's authority could be proven in action, and the impact of her choices resonated far beyond a single confrontation. In quiet moments, Mitchell reflected on the journey that had led to that defining day. Every drill, every mission, every decision had prepared her for the ultimate test of composure and courage. She realized that leadership was not a static concept. It was a living practice, continuously tested, continuously refined. That morning, she had faced one of the most challenging moments of her career, and in doing so, she had set a precedent that would influence countless soldiers, officers, and leaders across the military. The battalion continued to thrive, stronger and more cohesive than ever. Soldiers moved with confidence, guided by the example of a leader who had demonstrated that courage, precision, and integrity could overcome fear and intimidation. Mitchell's legacy was secure, not just in the formal recognition she received, but in the trust, respect, and admiration of every soldier who had witnessed her actions. The lesson of that morning, the power of leadership through courage, discipline, and unwavering principle, would endure indefinitely, shaping the future of the battalion and the leaders who emerged from it. And so, Captain Sarah Mitchell's story became legend. The officer who, faced with intimidation by a superior, acted with calm precision and courage, earning the unwavering respect of her soldiers and leaving a legacy of leadership that would echo for generations. In every drill, every formation, every mission, her example reminded the battalion that true authority is earned, tested, and proven in action. The memory of that morning remained vivid, a timeless testament to the power of courage, discipline, and leadership under pressure.